What is up, YouTube? So I am super excited to announce that I'm going to be finally putting a join button on the channel. I have, been approved for YouTube memberships. I'm saying approved like I applied for it and then they said yes. No, they just told me. They actually told me a while ago I was able to do memberships, but I was really confused about it and how to launch it on my channel. But basically, what you're going to see on the channel from now on when you go to my channel page is a join button. And by clicking that join button, then you become a member of the channel. Now, what this is going to allow you to see is some exclusive content. Now, up to now, I've only been putting exclusive content and in the future, early release videos. I've done one early release on Patreon, but that's going to be happening more frequently. And if you're a Patreon member, you already got access to it. If you want to become a member, you can also do that now through YouTube memberships. Now, the only big difference between YouTube memberships and Patreon moving forward is really just going to be one is internal to YouTube, which is going to be the join button on the bottom of my channel page. And Patreon technically is a completely separate website. So many YouTubers use Patreon. They think that Patreon and YouTube are affiliated. They're actually two completely separate websites. So Patreon is not exclusively for YouTubers and is not actually affiliated with YouTube, but there are ways to make content not viewable to your general audience, but still be able to share it with your Patreon people. But it's even easier to do with YouTube memberships. So easy, I wish I could just automatically flip all my patrons over to YouTube memberships. And for people who are confused about joining Patreon, but want to become supporters of the channel, it's much easier to do it on a join button internal to YouTube than it is going to a separate website like Patreon and then joining that way. So moving forward, basically everybody in about the same tier will be listed together. So as YouTube members start to acquire, if I start to acquire YouTube members, they will also be listed with my Patreon member supporters. YouTube memberships will start at $4.99. And then have the $9.99 tier, and that's for people who want to be listed as a producer. But really, you'll get most of it at the $4.99 tier, which is equal to the $5 tier on Patreon. Like I said, these two things are basically the same thing. It's just a little bit easier for people who are not tech savvy, like myself, to join via something that's internal to YouTube, as opposed to having to go to a separate website, which is what Patreon is. But I'm super excited about memberships. I'm super excited about having sort of this, tier and ability added to my channel. And I look forward to building memberships just like we've built Patreon. And Patreon has gotten bigger than I ever imagined. I started it thinking nobody's going to want to be my patron, and now it's much larger than I could have expected. So memberships is starting. If you're not a patron yet, but you wanted to support the channel, feel free to join memberships. Or if you're this sounds easier than Patreon, feel free to leave Patreon and then join us in YouTube memberships, because it might just be easier for you. As far as being a member, you will want to go to the community page of my channel, and there you'll see, if you become a member, exclusive posts that are already there. And it's just the last couple things I posted on Patreon. Now, and that's also the difference. As soon as you join Patreon, you get access to all the stuff I've been doing on Patreon since I started my Patreon. Whereas YouTube memberships has the last couple of things I posted, but will mostly be getting content moving forward. I'm not going to try to backwards content everything over the memberships. It's more going to be moving forward. If Patreon knows it, memberships will also know it. And like I said, it's going to be really, really easy to join. It's internal to YouTube, and all you have to do is hit the join button. I look forward to seeing how this goes.